The twin moons have floated in the dark sky like two pale guardians, watching silently over the grand arena below. Their cool silver glow touched every stone of the ancient Colosseum, turning the night into something strangely calm, calm enough to deceive a person into thinking nothing dangerous was about to happen. But danger was exactly what everyone had come to witness. Every seat trembled beneath the weight of voices, murmurs, and sharp breaths from hundreds of alien spectators who had gathered for a single reason. A human had accepted a duel against a warrior. Humans were rare on this side of the galaxy. Most traveled quietly, trying not to cause trouble. But Jonah Vale was different. He did not look dangerous. His armor was simple, his weapons plain, and his expression almost gentle. But he carried a strange confidence that unsettled those who looked at him closely. It was as if he knew something no one else did. Across the arena floor stood the challenger, Sar, younger sister of the famous Commander Sar. Was tall for her with shimmering blue scales that reflected the moonlight. Her eyes glowed like heated metal, sharp and proud, and her posture hinted at someone raised to believe she could never lose. She held her chin high, her emotions hidden behind the discipline of years of combat training, but even from the stands people sensed her impatience. Had insulted humanity earlier that same day. She called humans soft creatures, beings who only survived by luck, not strength. She said humans hid behind technology and excuses, not courage. Her words had echoed across the marketplace, causing many to laugh and many to watch the lone human nearby. Jonah didn't shout back. He didn't argue. He didn't even look angry. He just said quietly, "If you truly believe that, test me. Then decide." No one expected him to follow through. But now here he stood, breathing calm, studying the ground as though he was preparing not for battle, but for something more personal. Something he had carried with him long before stepping onto this alien world. A low humming spread through the arena as energy barriers rose around the dueling circle. The silver glow of the moons danced along their surfaces. The crowd leaned forward, excited, impatient, hungry to see the outcome. A duel between a human had not happened in centuries. Some believed it was unfair, others believed it was pointless. But everyone agreed on one thing: the human would lose. Jonah could feel the weight of their expectations, but he did not let it shake him. He closed his eyes for a moment, steadying his breath, remembering a lesson taught long ago: strength is not just power. Strength is what remains when everything else has fallen apart. Finally stepped forward. Her boots clicked against the stone floor, strong, confident, controlled. She did not bow nor smile. Her pride would not allow it. "You will fight me," she said, voice clear and sharp. "One round, no mercy, no retreat, no interference." Jonah opened his eyes, agreed. Narrowed her gaze. "You understand the consequences. A duel is not a friendly test. You may leave here broken." Jonah gave a small nod. "I don't need to win, I only need to stand." Something about those words made the crowd shift uncomfortably. Felt her muscles tense, though she didn't understand why. His voice carried something she didn't expect, conviction so honest it was almost frightening. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her dueling blade. The weapon was long and thin, an arc of violet light forming its edge when activated. It could slice through steel and burn through armor. It was not a toy, and Jonah knew it. He pulled out a metal cylinder and pressed a button. A staff extended, glowing faintly at the ends. It was old, scratched, and simple, but the way he held it made it seem more than just a weapon. It looked like something he had relied on many times before. Rolled her shoulders and tilted her chin slightly. "You disappoint me already. I expected fear. At least show me a little." Jonah shook his head. "Fear's there, I just don't let it decide for me." Before she could reply, the arena bell sounded, a thunderous echo that shook the very stones beneath their feet. The duel had officially begun. Moved first, she didn't sprint or leap. She glided forward with smooth, sharp steps, her blade humming as it sliced through the air. Jonah raised his staff, preparing for the first strike. His eyes stayed on hers, not on her weapon, not on her feet, on her. When their weapons finally clashed, sparks scattered like fireflies, pushed forward, expecting Jonah to crumble under her strength. He didn't. His arms shook slightly, but he held firm. Then he stepped back, redirecting her energy rather than fighting it directly. The audience gasped. Humans normally relied on speed, not technique, but Jonah fought like someone who understood pressure, rhythm, and balance. Attacked again, faster this time, slicing a glowing arc aimed at his shoulder. He ducked under it, rolled to the side, and repositioned himself with surprising calm. "You hide your weakness well," said, irritated. "I don't hide anything," Jonah answered. "I just don't break easily." The crowd murmured louder now. Something unusual was happening. The human wasn't winning, but he wasn't losing either. Felt something shift in her chest, something unwelcome, doubt. She tightened her grip on her blade and took one more step toward him. For the first time, Jonah's expression softened, not in fear, but in understanding. "You didn't challenge a human to defeat them," he said quietly. "You challenged me because you've never been truly tested." Froze. The moons continued to glow above them. And the duel was only just beginning. The arena air was thick with tension. Every spectator leaned forward, eyes wide, waiting for the next move. Sar's violet blade hummed like a live wire in her hand, reflecting the twin moons' pale light. Sparks flickered faintly where the energy met Jonah Vale's staff. But for now, the human held firm, not attacking, not striking, only moving with calm precision. Anger flared. She had expected a fearful human, someone who would tremble, plead, or at least stumble. Instead, she faced a figure who stood as though the duel were already a part of him, an extension of his will, not his body. That steadiness unnerved her more than any weapon ever could. "You fight with no aggression," she said sharply, circling him like a predator. "Is this how your kind confronts danger, by standing still and letting it pass?" Her voice carried over the arena, clear and biting. The crowd murmured in excitement. Humans had long been underestimated, now they seemed different. Jonah raised his staff, blocking a swift strike, redirecting her energy to the side. "Aggression isn't strength," he said softly. "It's control, timing, and knowing when to act." He moved with the precision of someone who had survived countless battles without needing to overpower anyone. Each motion was careful, deliberate, yet full of quiet force. Strikes became sharper, faster, unpredictable. She jumped, spun, twisted, and extended her blade in impossible angles. But Jonah's stance never faltered. He twisted, ducked, and deflected. Sparks flew like tiny stars between them, illuminating his plain, sweat-streaked face. It was a face that showed no fear, only focus. For the first time, felt frustration creep into her movements. She had expected the thrill of dominating a weaker opponent, the satisfaction of proving her power. Instead, she met resistance in a human who was nothing if not ordinary in appearance. How could someone so seemingly unremarkable survive her onslaught? "You are stronger than I imagined," she said, almost under her breath. Her pride refused to admit the truth. The human was not just surviving, he was teaching her patience, endurance, and control. "I am human," Jonah replied calmly, "and that means I endure." His words were simple, but they carried weight. Every spectator in the arena felt it, as though those words were a bridge reaching across species, across experience, into the heart of anyone who understood struggle. Eyes narrowed. "Endurance alone does not win battles. You will falter, you will fall." She moved in again, faster than before, her blade a streak of violet energy. Jonah met her strike with a defensive sweep, redirecting her momentum. Sparks flew as the energy collided, stumbled slightly, not from weakness, but from surprise. How could a human anticipate every move without attacking back? "You rely on luck," she accused, her voice rising. The crowd gasped. Humans were said to be lucky, yes, but Jonah's calmed any notion of randomness. His movements were precise, intentional. She could see it now. He survived not by chance, but by understanding, not just the fight, but himself. Jonah's eyes softened for a brief moment. "It's not luck," he said quietly. "It's life. I have failed many times, fallen many times, yet I rise. That is why I endure." His voice was steady, unwavering, and somehow kind. For a human, it carried an almost strange dignity, for it carried a lesson she had never expected to learn in a duel. Her chest heaved as she tightened her grip on her weapon. "Your words cannot save you," she shouted, lunging again. This time she added a sudden twist in her attack, a complex pattern that had felled many who were stronger, faster, and more skilled than any human. The audience gasped. Her blade arced dangerously, almost grazing his shoulder. Sparks leaped and the metal hissed. Jonah stumbled back slightly, feeling the heat on his arm where her energy grazed him. Pain lanced sharply, but he did not cry out. He adjusted his stance, inhaled deeply, and moved as if he had rehearsed this exact moment hundreds of times. He held his staff against her blade, redirecting her energy once more, and stepped back a pace. Eyes widened. The human had survived the strike, not by blocking, but by adapting instantly. "You are not like the others," she admitted, her voice shaking, though she did not lower her blade. "Your kind fights blindly. You are different." "I am human," Jonah said again softly. "We are not blindly strong. We are stubborn. We are enduring. We survive when all hope seems gone, and we rise again when others fall." A silence fell over the arena. The spectators leaned in, captivated, as if hearing a story unfold instead of watching a duel. Some of the exchanged puzzled glances. What was this human teaching them beyond combat? What was this lesson hidden inside his calm, ordinary movements? His pride burned hotter, but curiosity now mingled with it. She circled him slowly, studying the way he stood, the way he moved, the way he carried himself despite exhaustion and slight wounds from her attacks. She noticed the faint scars on his arms, tiny lines that told stories of battles unseen, sacrifices made, and nights survived alone. Each scar seemed to speak louder than any word could. "You are injured," she said finally, a trace of concern breaking her rigid tone. "Why do you still fight?" Her blade wavered slightly, betraying her confusion. Jonah looked at her, calm and honest. "Because I've always fought," he said quietly. "Not to win, not for pride, but because giving up is never an option. That is what being human means." His glowing eyes flickered in the moonlight, reflecting something she had never seen before: respect, fascination, and the tiniest hint of fear, not for her life, but for the human before her. He was ordinary, yet extraordinary. He was fragile, yet unyielding. And suddenly she realized something unsettling. She had underestimated him completely. The duel paused naturally, neither moving forward nor retreating. Jonah's chest rose and fell steadily. Studied him, chest tight, mind racing. Somewhere deep inside, pride struggled against the awe his words and actions inspired. The moons above cast their silver light, making his battered, sweat-streaked face glow with quiet strength. And in that suspended moment, the battle was no longer only about skill or power. It had become something else, something personal, something that touched not just the body but the soul. Jonah raised his staff slowly and adjusted her blade. Neither of them spoke for a moment. They only stared. The duel had begun as a test of strength. Now it was a test of understanding, of what it truly meant to fight, to endure, and to rise. And neither of them knew who would change more by the time the duel was over. The arena seemed to hold its breath. Every spectator's eyes followed the subtle movements of the human and the warrior. Sparks still floated in the air, remnants of last strike, and the cool glow of the twin moons painted long shadows across the stone floor. The duel was no longer merely a contest of weapons. It had become a clash of spirits, an unspoken battle of willpower. Inhaled sharply and surged forward. Her blade hummed with a violent energy, slicing arcs of violet light through the air. Each strike carried the weight of her pride, her training, and her family's legacy. She had never faced an opponent who forced her to push beyond simple speed or strength. Jonah met each attack with calm determination, his staff moving fluidly, as though dancing to a rhythm only he could feel. The crowd gasped again when he blocked a particularly vicious strike that should have cut deep. He pivoted, redirected her momentum, and stepped back, his movements precise but effortless. His armor was scratched, his forearm grazed by energy burns, yet he did not falter. The human did not strike back. Instead, he absorbed, redirected, and waited. His restraint made hesitate. Every moment he did not attack chipped away at her certainty. "You fight strangely," said, narrowing her eyes. Her voice carried a mix of irritation and curiosity. "No fury, no aggression, just endurance." Jonah's gaze met hers. "Strength isn't only in power," he said quietly. "It's in knowing how to survive and when to act." Her strikes became faster, sharper, and more unpredictable, but still he adapted. It was as if he could read not the movements but the intent behind them. Each time she lunged, he anticipated, he twisted, and he countered, not with force but with precision. He made her overextend. He made her doubt. And slowly the human who had seemed fragile began to shape the battle. His chest heaved with exertion and frustration. She had trained for this moment all her life, yet here was a human who refused to be overwhelmed by raw strength. He moved with something she had never witnessed in her kind, instinct sharpened by experience, tempered by endurance, and softened by empathy. "Why do you fight without striking?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Are you afraid?" Jonah shook his head slightly, eyes calm. "Fear is there," he admitted. "It always is, but I don't let it decide for me." His voice was low, steady, but it carried a weight that seemed to sink deep into her chest. It unsettled her. She had expected fear, weakness, or at least hesitation. Instead, she saw a human who could feel pain, who could understand risk, and yet remained unbroken. Lunged again, twisting her body in a way that should have disarmed him. Sparks flew where staff met blade, illuminating the tension in her glowing eyes. The crowd murmured in disbelief. How could someone so ordinary survive such a relentless onslaught? And yet he did. Each strike that should have brought her victory was met not with resistance alone, but with adaptation, skill, and an unshakable will. Jonah's breathing was controlled but deliberate. Sweat ran down his face. His arm burned where the energy grazed him, but he adjusted his stance, keeping his balance. Every muscle in his body was engaged, yet his expression remained calm. He moved not out of instinct alone, but out of years of surviving impossible situations. He had endured disasters, loss, and pain, more than any warrior in the arena could imagine, and it had taught him patience. His pride flared. "You survive too easily," she said, frustration edging her tone. "Your endurance is unnatural for your species. You make a mockery of combat." Jonah's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "It is not mockery, it is life. I have learned to survive not because I am stronger, but because I never give up. That is what humans do." Her glowing eyes widened slightly. There was no arrogance in his words, no bravado, only truth. And that truth gnawed at the core of her confidence. She had expected to dominate, to prove her strength without question. Instead, she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about power, about courage, about the very nature of survival. The human stamina astonished her. With every strike she threw, he adjusted, absorbed, and redirected. She noticed the faint tremor in his hands, the subtle rise and fall of his chest, the slight sweat-streaked line across his face. It would have been enough for others to crumble, but Jonah did not. His vulnerability made him stronger, not weaker. Strikes grew more erratic, faster, more desperate. She pushed herself to the limit, attempting moves that should have overpowered any human, and yet he continued to meet her force with calm precision. She realized then that this duel was not just about strength. It was about endurance, control, and an understanding deeper than the skill of a weapon. For the first time, hesitated. A flicker of doubt crossed her mind, subtle but powerful. She had never faced an opponent like him. She had always been the best, the quickest, the strongest among her peers. But here was a human, ordinary in appearance, plain in weaponry, who all expectations. Jonah noticed her pause. He did not move forward, nor did he relax. He simply stood, staff at the ready, his breathing steady. And in that pause he spoke softly, not as a challenge, but as a truth. "I am not here to defeat you. I am here to endure, to survive, and to show that survival is not always loud or violent. It is quiet, persistent, and unbroken." His glowing eyes locked onto his. Her pride, her anger, her expectation of dominance, all collided with the reality of his presence. She felt something she had never felt in combat, admiration mixed with disbelief. The twin moons above reflected in the human's eyes, making them seem almost otherworldly. The arena fell silent, the crowd holding its breath, witnessing something more than a duel. They watched a lesson unfold, one taught not by victory, but by the quiet, unyielding will of a human standing against impossible odds. Stepped back, her chest heaving, and studied him intently. Sparks faded, energy hummed softly, and the battle had momentarily paused, not because one had won, but because the human had reshaped the fight entirely. He had shown her that strength was more than power, and endurance could outweigh aggression. And in that moment, beneath the twin moons of the first crack appeared in Sar's unshakable pride. The arena fell into a tense quiet. The hum of energy from S blade was the only sound, and even that seemed muted under the weight of what was happening. Both combatants stood facing each other, breathing hard, muscles taut. Sparks of light still lingered from their previous clash, but now the fight carried a different energy, one that had nothing to do with skill or reflexes, and everything to do with resilience. His chest heaved as she stepped back slightly, studying Jonah in a way she had never studied any opponent before. His posture was plain, almost humble, yet every motion carried purpose. There was no arrogance, no desire to dominate, only a quiet, almost stubborn determination. She felt an unfamiliar stir in her chest, curiosity, perhaps even admiration. "You continue to stand," she said finally, her voice sharp but tinged with something softer. "Despite my strikes, despite the energy burns and fatigue, why, how?" Jonah lowered his staff just slightly, not in surrender, but as if sharing something he had long carried inside. "I have fallen many times," he said quietly. "More than I can count. I've lost friends, lost battles, lost everything I thought I could protect. And yet, I continue. I survive because giving up is not an option." His glowing eyes widened. The words carried a weight that made her pause. In culture, strength was measured in victories, in dominance, in the ability to overwhelm an opponent. To survive losses and keep rising, that was a foreign idea. "Survival is endurance?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Yes," Jonah said, stepping slightly closer, though carefully respecting the duel. "Endurance. Strength is not just what you can destroy. It is what you can endure, what you can rise from, and what you can protect even when the world seems to have abandoned you." Felt her hand tighten around the hilt of her blade, her fingers trembling, not from fear, but from an emotion she could not name. He spoke of pain, loss, and courage in a way that resonated deeply. Something about his quiet confidence, his unyielding spirit, touched her in a way that victory or strength never had. Jonah's voice softened further. "I have scars you cannot see," he said, gesturing briefly to his arms. "They are from battles that should have ended me, from missions that failed, from lives I could not save, and still I rise." His pride burned, but she felt it shift into something else, something heavier. She realized that the duel was no longer about who could strike harder or faster. It was about understanding. She had challenged him, thinking him weak, thinking him unworthy. But here he was, human, ordinary in appearance, yet extraordinary in spirit. The crowd murmured, sensing the change. The duel was no longer a simple contest. It had become a story, a lesson, a moment that transcended physical combat. Each in the stands felt it in their chest. This human endured not because of training or weapons or luck, but because of an inner strength forged through unimaginable experiences. Inhaled deeply, forcing herself to focus. She could not let her emotions cloud her technique. She moved suddenly, launching a flurry of strikes designed to test him further, faster, unpredictable. Her blade hummed in deadly arcs, tracing glowing patterns in the air. But Jonah met each one with the same calm adaptation, twisting his staff to redirect energy, rolling when necessary, always holding his ground. You never strike to hurt," she said between breaths. "You only defend, you only endure. Why?" Jonah's eyes flicked to the twin moons above, their pale light reflecting in the sweat on his brow. "Because fighting to destroy is easy," he said. "Fighting to survive, to endure, to rise when everything is against you, that is the real challenge." His chest tightened. Her strikes slowed almost unconsciously as she watched him. There was a truth in his words, a depth she had never expected to encounter in a human. She had trained to be the strongest, the fastest, the most feared. But this was a strength she could not match by skill alone. The memory of her childhood flashed briefly in her mind. Endless training sessions, lessons in dominance, victories celebrated and losses scorned. In all that, no one had ever shown her that weakness could coexist with strength, that pain could coexist with power, that endurance could outshine aggression. Jonah's gaze softened further. "I fight not to prove I am stronger than you," he said. "I fight to prove that a human heart can endure, that we can rise when everything seems lost, and that true courage is not about victory. It is about standing when no one else believes you can." His blade wavered. She could feel the truth of his words cutting deeper than any strike ever could. Her pride screamed, telling her to attack, to dominate, to finish the duel. But her heart told her something else. She felt admiration, respect, and a strange, unfamiliar connection to the human before her. The duel paused naturally, neither advancing, neither retreating. Sparks faded from the air, and the hum of energy seemed quieter now, almost reflective. Lowered her blade slightly, studying him. He was battered, his arms streaked with sweat and faint burns, yet he stood unbroken, calm, and unwavering. "You are remarkable," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "I underestimated you." Jonah gave a small nod, faintly smiling, but he did not lower his staff fully. "I do not seek your approval," he said gently. "I only hope you see that strength comes in many forms." For the first time, Sar realized that victory in this duel would not come from power or skill alone. She had expected a human to fall quickly, to be outmatched, to prove nothing more than her own superiority. Instead, she faced someone who carried his battles, his losses, and his endurance into every movement. She felt her certainty crack, replaced by awe, confusion, and a flicker of respect she had never experienced before. The twin moons shone above them, casting silver light on the two figures. One carried pride, skill, and expectation. The other carried scars, endurance, and an unshakable will. And beneath that light, the duel had transformed. It was no longer a fight for victory. It was a lesson, one that Sar would never forget. And Jonah Vale, the human, continued to stand, carrying the weight of everything he had endured, silently teaching her the meaning of strength beyond power. The twin moons of glowed pale and steady, casting long shadows over the arena. The air smelled of ozone and sweat. Sparks floated faintly where Violet blade had struck the stone earlier. The duel had grown from a clash of weapons into a clash of spirit, and now the tension reached its peak. His chest heaved, her muscles tight, and her pride sharpened with each passing second. She had never faced an opponent like Jonah Vale, not in her training, not in her battles, not in the countless duels that had made her a warrior. He did not strike with aggression, nor retreat in fear. He moved with precision, endurance, and an unshakable will. It unnerved her in a way no skill or strength ever could. "You survive everything I throw at you?" she shouted, spinning her blade in a deadly arc. Sparks erupted as her energy collided with Jonah's staff. He twisted instantly, redirecting her strike, absorbing the force, and barely staggering backward. The crowd gasped. A human should have faltered, should have fallen, but he did not. Jonah's breathing was steady, controlled, almost rhythmic. Sweat ran down his face, and his arms shook slightly under the strain, but he remained upright. He did not push back. He did not strike. He simply endured. And in that endurance he gained something could not match: perspective. "You will fall eventually," she hissed, her pride fueling every strike. "Everyone falls." Jonah's eyes, calm and unwavering, met hers. "Not everyone," he said quietly, yet the sound carried across the arena. "Some of us rise even when everything tells us we cannot." Lunged with her most dangerous move, a whirlwind of violet light that should have overwhelmed him. Sparks lit the arena like lightning, the air cracking with energy. Jonah rolled, twisted, and raised his staff just enough to redirect the force. The strike grazed his shoulder, searing flesh beneath the armor, sending a sharp jolt of pain through him. He stumbled for a fraction of a second, long enough for the spectators to gasp. But he did not collapse. He did not surrender. He rose again, gripping his staff, his jaw tight. The crowd watched in stunned silence. The human before them, plain, ordinary, seemingly fragile, continued to stand, blood trickling down his arm, yet refusing to yield. Felt a flicker of doubt in her chest, a tiny crack in her armor of certainty. "How can you still stand?" she demanded, her voice trembling, half with anger, half with confusion. Jonah's expression softened. "Because giving up was never an option," he said. "Because I have endured worse, survived worse, and I know that true strength is measured not by power but by persistence." His pride flared again, urging her to end the duel before he broke her patience. She moved faster, her strikes sharper, combining techniques she had perfected over years of training. Each arc of her blade shimmered dangerously in the moonlight, yet Jonah met every attack. He blocked, twisted, redirected, absorbed. And then, with a single, fluid movement, he caught her blade with the tip of his staff, holding it pinned just above the stone floor. The arena fell silent. Even the crowd could feel the tension between the two fighters, frozen for a heartbeat that stretched like an eternity. Stared into Jonah's eyes calm despite the blood, sweat, and fatigue, eyes that held quiet determination, endurance, and a strange gentleness. You could have been finished," she whispered, disbelief in her voice. "I could have ended this duel with one strike." Jonah released her blade, stepping back slightly, not pressing any advantage. "I could have fallen too," he said softly. "But I did not, and I will not. That is what being human means. We endure even when no one believes we can." His chest heaved, her pride shattered in a way she had never experienced. She had always believed victory was earned through skill, speed, and strength. She had never considered that endurance, courage, and the ability to rise despite pain could be stronger than any technique, sharper than any weapon. Her blade wavered. Sparks danced along its edge as she adjusted her grip, struggling to find focus amidst the storm of admiration, frustration, and awe building in her chest. She had expected to dominate a human. Instead, she faced someone who had shown her a different kind of power, a quiet, unyielding, invisible strength. Jonah, still standing despite the energy burns and exhaustion, gave a small nod, his voice calm. "I do not seek to defeat you," he said. "I only hope to show you that courage and strength are not always loud. They are quiet, persistent, and unbroken." For the first time, Sar felt her certainty crumble. Her pride, her anger, her expectation of dominance, all collided with the reality of this human's endurance. She had trained to be unbeatable, to conquer, to triumph. But here, standing before her, was a human who had not only survived, but had forced her to see that true strength could take many forms. The twin moons glowed pale above them. Sparks from the previous strikes still hovered faintly in the arena air. The duel had reached its turning point, not because one would fall, but because the very definition of victory had shifted. Lowered her blade slightly, studying Jonah with something that resembled awe, though she would not admit it. He was battered, wounded, and exhausted, yet he stood unbroken. The crowd whispered, sensing that the duel had become more than a contest. It had become a lesson, a story, a revelation. Jonah's steady gaze met hers. "I fight not to destroy," he said softly. "I fight to endure, to rise when I am pushed down, to show that being human means never giving up, no matter how impossible the challenge." His glowing eyes flickered with an emotion she had never expected: respect. She felt her pride melt slowly into something heavier, more profound. She realized the duel was no longer about winning or losing. It was about seeing, understanding, and acknowledging a strength she had never imagined. The arena fell silent as the two stood, weapons poised but still. The air was charged not with violence but with revelation. And in that silence beneath the twin moons, the human who should have been defeated had transformed the duel into a lesson in endurance, courage, and unbreakable will. The arena had fallen into a rare stillness, a moment between heartbeats. The twin moons cast their pale glow across the battle floor, illuminating the sweat-streaked, blood-marked figures of Sar and Jonah Vale. Both were exhausted, but the duel had transformed into something deeper than combat. It was no longer a contest of strength or speed. It had become a confrontation of values, of spirit, of truth. His chest heaved as she lowered her blade slightly. For the first time, she felt uncertainty creep into her mind. She had trained her entire life to dominate, to excel, to never show weakness. Yet here was a human, a single, ordinary human, who had endured her relentless attacks, matched her speed, anticipated her moves, and remained unbroken. He was ordinary in appearance, yet extraordinary in endurance. "You endure too much," she said, her voice trembling slightly despite her pride. "How do you continue?" Jonah's gaze remained calm, unwavering. "Because I have no choice," he said quietly. "Life does not pause for fear or pain. It does not wait for us to be ready. We endure because we must. We rise because giving up is not an option." His glowing eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with a confusion that tugged at her heart. She had always measured strength through victory, through overpowering an opponent. But Jonah's presence challenged everything she believed. He had shown her that true strength could exist quietly, persistently, even in the face of overwhelming odds. She took a deep breath, her violet blade trembling slightly in her grip. For a fleeting moment, she saw not an enemy, but a reflection of her own fears. Fear of inadequacy, fear of failure, fear of a truth she had ignored. Jonah's endurance was not just a skill. It was a philosophy, a testament to survival, resilience, and courage that transcended species, weaponry, and pride. The human's words echoed in her mind. True strength is measured not by power but by persistence. Courage is standing when no one believes you can. Each word sank deep into her consciousness, striking harder than any blade ever could. Lunged again, faster than before, with a fierce determination. Her blade traced arcs of violet light, each strike more aggressive, more precise. Sparks erupted as her weapon clashed with Jonah's staff, illuminating their exhaustion. Yet he moved with calm precision, twisting and redirecting her energy without a single wasted motion. He was still human, still vulnerable, yet his endurance seemed limitless. "You," she breathed, halting briefly as her strike was effortlessly. "You are unbreakable." Jonah's lips curved into a small, faint smile, though his chest heaved with exertion. "Not unbreakable," he said softly. "Just unwilling to stay down, that is the difference." The words struck more profoundly than any strike of her blade. She realized that she had been measuring strength in the wrong way. Power and skill could win battles, yes, but true strength, the kind that could endure pain, loss, and failure, came from within. It came from the choice to rise, to persist, to face impossible odds without surrendering. Felt a strange mix of awe and humility. Her pride fought against the lesson, but her heart could not ignore it. The human before her was teaching her something she had never learned in all her years of combat. That endurance could surpass aggression, that courage could surpass raw power, and that true strength was not always loud or visible. She moved again, this time with a different intent. Her strikes were measured, deliberate, testing not just his body but his spirit. Jonah met each one with calm precision, yet she noticed something subtle. He adapted, he read, but he also respected. He was not trying to humiliate her, not trying to dominate, but simply enduring, surviving, and teaching by example. His chest tightened as she realized the depth of his lesson. She had challenged him to prove her superiority, yet he had challenged her assumptions, her pride, and her understanding of strength. Every strike, every move, every calm response he offered was a mirror, reflecting not just his endurance, but the limitations of her own perspective. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The twin moons' glow reflected in their eyes. Sweat ran down Jonah's face, energy burns streaked his armor, yet he stood tall. Blade hovered, trembling slightly. She felt her pride waver, replaced by something she had never experienced in combat: respect, awe, and a quiet acknowledgement that she had underestimated a human entirely. Jonah spoke softly, almost as if sensing her inner struggle. "Strength is not about dominance," he said. "It is about rising when all else fails. It is about enduring when the world tells you to quit. That is what humans do." His glowing eyes widened. The words sank into her heart. She lowered her blade slightly, feeling the weight of her assumptions crumble. Her chest heaved not from exertion, but from revelation. The human before her had endured, survived, and taught her a truth no amount of skill or training could convey. Courage, resilience, and persistence were greater than raw power. The arena was silent, the spectators frozen, sensing the transformation. The duel was no longer about victory or defeat. It had become a lesson, a moment where pride met truth, aggression met endurance, and skill met spirit. Sar's pride had been challenged, reshaped, and softened. She realized that the human had not only survived her attacks, but had fundamentally changed her understanding of strength. For the first time, she felt admiration without reservation, respect without hesitation, and an unspoken connection to the one she had expected to defeat. The twin moons bathed the arena in silver light. Sparks from the previous strikes faded into the cool night air. And beneath that glow, Sar took a step back, her chest heaving, her blade lowered slightly, and her heart opened in a way she had never expected. Jonah Vale, battered, exhausted, and wounded, still stood unbroken. He had not sought dominance. He had not sought victory. He had endured, and in doing so, he had left the proud warrior stunned, humbled, and profoundly changed. The duel had reached its climax, not through destruction, but through revelation. The arena was silent, the air heavy with the tension of a duel that had grown far beyond blades and strikes. Sparks from the previous attacks had long faded, leaving only the faint shimmer of residual energy. The twin moons hung low, bathing the battle floor in soft silver light. Every spectator held their breath, sensing the culmination of something extraordinary. Sar stood across from Jonah Vale, her blade lowered slightly. She was exhausted, her muscles trembling, her chest heaving, but her glowing eyes held a new light, a mixture of awe, respect, and understanding. She had entered the duel with certainty, believing victory would come easily, believing her pride and skill were enough. But the human before her had challenged every assumption, every expectation, every belief she held about strength. Jonah, battered and marked by her strikes, held his staff loosely, his breathing steady. Sweat streaked his face, his armor bore the scars of the duel, and faint burns ran along his arms, yet he stood unbroken. He had not sought to dominate or humiliate. He had simply endured, teaching her through action, persistence, and the quiet power of survival. His hand trembled as she adjusted her grip on her blade. She realized now that the duel was never truly about victory. It had been about truth, her truth, his truth, the truth of courage and endurance that transcended species. She took a deep breath, letting the tension flow out, feeling her pride soften. I underestimated you, she admitted, her voice quiet but firm. I thought strength was only about power, speed, and skill. I thought endurance was weakness. Jonah's eyes softened, but he did not speak immediately. He simply nodded, allowing her words to settle between them. The silence carried a weight heavier than any strike, heavier than any weapon. In that silence, the arena seemed to exhale. Lowered her blade fully. Sparks flickered briefly from the contact points of her attacks, then faded completely. She stepped forward slowly, cautiously, her gaze locked on the human who had every expectation. "You've taught me something," she said, her voice stronger now, filled with genuine respect. "Strength is not only what you can destroy. Strength is what you can endure, survive, and rise from. You've changed the way I see everything." Jonah's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. "I only survived," he said simply. "You chose to see it as a lesson. That's your strength." For the first time in her life, felt humility, but it was not weakness. It was clarity. She understood that her victories had always been measured in isolation, skill over skill, power over power. But true strength, the kind Jonah carried, was measured in endurance, in courage, in the willingness to rise when all odds were against you. The crowd began to murmur, slowly realizing that the duel had reached a conclusion not of defeat, but of revelation. They had expected domination, spectacle, and a simple victor. Instead, they had witnessed transformation, a proud warrior humbled, a human elevated, and a lesson that transcended the boundaries of species. Lowered her head slightly, a gesture of respect in her culture, rare but profound. "I challenge you not to conquer me," she said softly, her voice carrying across the arena. "I challenge you to endure, to survive, and to teach me the meaning of true strength. You have done all of that." Jonah took a cautious step forward, offering his hand not in challenge but in acknowledgement. "We all endure," he said quietly. "Some of us just learn it sooner, some of us later. You've seen it now." Studied his hand for a long moment. She felt her pride and ego clash with the deep respect forming in her heart. Slowly, deliberately, she extended her own hand, and they clasped. The gesture was simple, yet powerful, a human and bound by a shared understanding of courage and endurance. The twin moons' glow seemed brighter, reflecting in their eyes. For a moment, the world beyond the arena disappeared. There was no crowd, no expectation, no pride or defeat, only two beings who had shared a trial and emerged changed. Released his hand and took a step back, her violet blade lowered but her posture proud in a new way. "You have left me stunned," she said softly, yet firmly. "Not because you defeated me, but because you showed me a truth I could not see before." Jonah's faint smile widened slightly. "Then the duel has done its work," he said. "Not victory, not loss, but understanding. That is the real strength." The spectators erupted in quiet awe, not with the cheers of victory, but with the respect of witnessing a rare moment. A warrior humbled by insight, a human elevated by endurance, and a story that would be remembered far longer than the duel itself. Sar looked at Jonah Vale one last time. Her pride had been reshaped, her spirit humbled, her understanding of strength transformed. She realized that true courage was not in striking harder, faster, or stronger, but in rising, enduring, and teaching by example. Jonah, tired and marked by the battle, nodded once. The human heart had endured, survived, and shown a lesson far greater than victory. And in doing so, he had left the proud warrior stunned, transformed, and profoundly changed. The twin moons cast their final light across the arena as the two warriors walked apart, not as enemies, but as equals who had shared a battle of body, mind, and spirit. The duel had ended, not with destruction, but with revelation. And in that quiet understanding, a bond was forged, a lesson was learned, and the story of the human who endured beyond expectation became legend.